Alright, so I just watched Ghostbusters from Frozen Empire, and with this newest entry in the franchise, and it's following the Spengler family for when we last left them, and now we are back in New York City with the firehouse, and even with the new and the OG cast sort of blend together. It's sort of an epic new installment in the Ghostbusters franchise that we all know and love, and so much more. And so this will be my official review, and don't worry, there won't be any spoilers for this movie, and even to talk about some issues that could have been left out of the movie entirely, but even I'm going to talk about the good and the bad, but even with my overall experience with this movie and so much more. And so if you're new here, then be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. But now let's just hop into it. And now going into this movie, and even as we look at the Ghostbusters franchise, especially like those or like childhood films, and even this is instant nostalgia, especially with a Frozen Empire that is bringing back the OG cast with Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and even though with those early movies, and even with the Ghostbusters theme, it's really cool. And then until we got a Ghostbusters Afterlife, even with the new cast with Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, and Paul Rudd, and even with just like going into Frozen Empire, that they're continuing this new generation of Ghostbusters, where we're back at the firehouse, and even just to continue the legacy of where it all began back at New York, back at the firehouse, and even with the plot of this movie is with the Spengler family that is back, and even with an agent artifact that like becomes loose, and any help of the old Ghostbusters to help them like defeat that entity once and for all. And so there are some like key moments in this movie, but even though it's an overall enjoyable experience. And now, talk about my overall experience with this movie. I kind of felt like this movie is trying to bring on the touch of nostalgia, because it's the original Ghostbusters, like from the franchise that we all know and love. Maybe because we all love to bust some ghosts. But even with Frozen Empire, and even that it brought back the original cast to try to blend it in the new cast. But I feel like there are some issues that I have with this movie, because this is an almost a 2-hour movie, and even though I think it's nostalgia bait, but even from how the movie starts, and like even like it has a beginning, middle, and end, and even within like the opening minutes of the movie, it generally feels like a Ghostbusters movie, literally within like the first 10 minutes. But even as it starts going on and on, like even with having too many subplots, or many too many plot things that are going on throughout the whole rest of the movie, or like some which did not make sense, but and even though it sort of resolves in like a way, but I definitely enjoyed it for what it was, even for uncovering the true mystery of the artifact, and like trying to uncover the mystery and the dark spirit and sinister moments behind it. And now I want to talk about the entire cast, and even that we have the new and the OG cast, like I mentioned, and even with the new cast that are brought back into this installment, I thought they did a pretty good job. And even I gotta give a bravo to Paul Rudd, especially with his character as Gary, for when we last saw him in Ghostbusters Afterlife, because he went from being like a school teacher, and now it's being with the Spenglers back in New York, and now especially for it all started. But I feel like with Gary in this movie, he sort of felt like a father figure, especially with Phoebe, and you'll find out when you see the movie. But he really brings all those father elements, just like with Scott Lang in the MCU. But even with him, like just playing like a secondary father figure, especially in this Ghostbusters movie, I felt like it was pretty special to have a Paul Rudd, especially being the spotlight. He really felt like a dad. But even with those true family moments, and those elements that I feel like the Spenglers are kind of like a family, even towards the third act of the movie. But I won't spoil it. But there are some moments that are really special with the Spenglers. And even with McKenna Grace as Phoebe Spangler, I feel like with her character, like she did a pretty good job. But even for how I felt like, especially towards like the middle half of the movie, when she's kind of like a sidelined, and like even though with her character, it's not like so much important, but even though like with her dream, it's to bust some ghosts, especially as we've seen her hang on to the side of the moving Ghostbusters vehicle. I feel like with her character values and her moments, like we really get to spend more time on her. Like you know, she kind of feels, you know, she feels a little left out in this movie. But I won't get to anything. But the point is, I feel like with Phoebe Spangler, like we really get to explore more of her, and even with podcasts as a thing with Phoebe and podcast, they were buds in the first in like the last movie, but even exploring more of the friendship and how it's coming together, it's really nice. And even with Finn Wolfhard as Trevor, like he did a good job as well. And even with Lucky, and like, this is the returning cast, especially from the last movie. Even that, I want to touch upon the OG cast, and like even with Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson, and I feel like with their roles and how they contributed like to like now being like the main roles in this movie, because even like if you guys saw Afterlife, I mean like they appeared in like the last act of the movie, and now to have them finally in like a movie like to where I mean like they're fully in the marketing, they're like truly in this movie, and especially with Ray, like he's especially like he's everywhere throughout the movie, and even with blending them together, plus even with like the final minutes of the movie, it truly feels great. And just have the OG cast and to feel some nostalgia. But even though I found this to be like a bit like, you know, a bait, or like even like there are some issues to be had, but even with the rest of the characters, especially with Kumail Giamatti, I thought he was funny, and even with the comedic lines and his humor that he delivered, I thought it was really good. And even with the addition of Patton Oswalt as like it's like a person that like helps them like trying to uncover this agent artifact, so especially with the villain up against it, it is really good. Plus I like Patton Oswalt as an actor and as a comedian, and even to have him like in this movie, it was really amazing. And even like there are some new characters introduced, but it just felt like sidelined of what this movie really is. But even though it's a 2-hour movie, I felt like it could have been better. But again, it's just like a solid, good entry. Even though as I sat back watching like so sort of like some like key moments play out, I had a pretty enjoyable time with this movie. Again, it's not like a perfect or a fantastic movie for I would rate or like rank this movie, especially within this franchise. But even with the entire experience, I mean, it'll totally feel like a Ghostbusters movie, especially within like the opening minutes and near towards the third act of the film, for it really comes together, how it really resolves in like a way. But even as we've seen throughout the marketing and like for the way that they want to like market this thing as like a nostalgia, like we're bringing back the OG cast, and like we're like bringing back this kind of stuff. But even with this movie, and I totally feel like it was amazing just to being back in New York in the firehouse, and even with how the frozen elements combined, and well as a frozen entity, dark, sinister stuff, and that like happens, and I truly enjoyed everything that it brought, and it's just a good movie. And so for my final thoughts is I enjoyed Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Again, it's not like a perfect or a fantastic movie. It's just a solid entry. And even though this is the direct follow-up from Ghostbusters Afterlife, and they're just continuing the new generation of Ghostbusters, and even with blending in the new and the OG cast that were back in New York at the firehouse, and even to feel like a real Ghostbusters movie. And again, I had an enjoyable time watching this. I think you will too. And like, and you know, just let me know what you thought of it. And like, I give this a solid rating, and for whatever I rank this, but that's up to you guys to decide. And there's so much more, so it's a good and enjoyable enough time as well. And so that's where we have first video, and just let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below, and what your thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire if you end up seeing the movie, and give me a rating to 1 out of 10. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for future videos. You can also follow all my social medias, which are linked down below. And with that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.